Hi everyone, welcome to the channel After All That Years.
I found out my wife was cheating when I hired a private investigator, and what I discovered changed everything I thought I knew about our marriage. My name is Harold, and I've been married to my wife Susan for 7 years. Our relationship wasn't flawless, but I always thought we had something solid beneath us. That all shifted last weekend, and I'm still trying to piece together what happened. Susan had been mentioning this party for weeks, some gathering at her new coworker's place. The guy's name was Derek, and from what little she told me, he was unmarried and had this magnetic personality that seemed to draw people in. The casual way she brought him up, yet how frequently his name came up in conversation, started gnawing at me. Initially, I pushed those feelings aside. I told myself I was reading too much into innocent workplace friendships. Susan has always been the social butterfly between us. She thrives on meeting new people and building connections, while I prefer quiet evenings at home with a good book or the evening news. But as the party date approached, my uneasiness intensified. When I asked who else would be attending, she just shrugged. Oh, the usual work crowd. Nobody you'd recognize. When I pressed for specifics, her demeanor shifted. She became irritated, accusing me of making something out of nothing. I explained that I wasn't comfortable with her attending. It wasn't specifically about Derek or the other guests. Or at least, not entirely. What bothered me was how secretive she'd become. In our 7 years together, we'd always communicated openly, even during disagreements. This time felt different. She'd already decided, and my concerns seemed irrelevant. The evening of the party, I sat in our living room hoping she might reconsider. I didn't want an argument, but I wanted her to understand my perspective. Instead, she appeared at the top of the stairs wearing something I'd never seen before. A fitted black dress that was far more revealing than her usual style. She looked beautiful, but it felt like she was dressing for someone else's attention. "What do you think?" she asked, doing a little turn. I hesitated, my coffee growing cold in my hands. "It looks nice," I said, though my voice came out flat. She rolled her eyes and picked up her purse from the kitchen counter. "Don't wait up for me," she said, and then she was gone, leaving only the faint scent of her perfume and the sound of her heels clicking down our front walkway. I spent the evening channel surfing, unable to concentrate on anything. My mind kept wandering. Where was she? Who was she talking to? Was I being irrational, or was there something real behind this growing pit in my stomach? I resisted the urge to text or call. I didn't want to come across as possessive, but the longer she was out, the heavier the silence in our house became. She returned well past 1 in the morning. I pretended to be asleep when she slipped into bed beside me. There was the smell of wine on her breath and something else, a floral scent that wasn't her usual perfume. My heart sank, but I didn't say anything. I just lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling more isolated than I'd ever felt in our marriage. The next morning, I woke to Susan moving around the kitchen, humming softly as if the previous night had been completely ordinary. For me, it felt like waking up with a concrete block on my chest. The aroma of fresh coffee drifted up to our bedroom, but it didn't bring its usual comfort. I remained in bed, replaying the previous evening, how confident she'd looked leaving the house, and how she was now trying so hard to appear normal. Eventually, I got up and joined her in the kitchen. She stood by the sink in her bathrobe, scrolling through her phone while sipping coffee. "Morning," she said without looking up, her tone unnaturally cheerful. "Morning," I replied, and my voice sounded colder than I'd intended. She glanced at me, raising an eyebrow. "What's with the attitude?" I wanted to ask her so many things. Who had been at the party? Why all the secrecy? Why did she smell like someone else's perfume when she came home? Instead, I just shrugged. Nothing. Just didn't sleep well. She didn't pursue it. Instead, she started talking about trivial things. How the coffee tasted different, the weather forecast, her plans for the week. It felt forced, like she was trying to fill the air before I could say something she didn't want to hear. After a few minutes, I couldn't stand it anymore. "Did you enjoy yourself last night?" I asked, keeping my tone light. She paused for just a moment before responding, her smile returning a little too quickly. "Yeah, it was fine. Just a typical work thing. Nothing exciting happened." I nodded, trying to read her expression. "What time did you get in?" She looked up at the ceiling, pretending to think. "Oh, I don't know. Maybe around midnight?" I didn't respond, but I knew it had been much later. I'd heard her car in the driveway closer to 1:30. "Why? Is something wrong?" she asked, her voice taking on a syrupy sweetness. "No," I said quickly, even though everything felt wrong. "Just curious?" She smiled and returned to her phone, but something in my gut told me the pieces didn't fit. I wanted to trust her, but the small details kept nagging at me. The dress, the late arrival, the unfamiliar perfume. It all painted a picture I didn't want to see. After breakfast, she said she needed to run errands and left the house. I watched her drive away, feeling like a stranger in my own marriage. I spent the day pacing our living room, trying to convince myself I was overreacting, but deep down, I knew I wasn't. I decided to look at her social media for clues, something I'd never done before. She hadn't posted anything from the party, which wasn't unusual for her. But when I checked the profiles of a few of her coworkers, I found photos from the previous night. There she was in that black dress, standing next to Derek. They looked comfortable together. In one photo, he had his arm around her waist, and she was leaning into him, smiling. My stomach dropped. It wasn't concrete evidence of anything, but it felt like a betrayal nonetheless. By the time she returned home, I was a wreck. I didn't confront her. I didn't know how. Instead, I pretended everything was normal, even though I felt like my world was crumbling around me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with questions I wasn't ready to ask. Who was Susan when I wasn't around? And more importantly, who was I in this marriage if I couldn't even demand honesty? But I knew I couldn't remain silent forever. The cracks were beginning to show, and it was only a matter of time before everything collapsed. The morning after I saw those photos, I couldn't look at Susan the same way. Every smile, every casual comment felt rehearsed, like she was performing for me. I wanted to confront her. I needed to, but I couldn't find the right moment or the right words. The weight of my suspicions seemed to have paralyzed me, leaving me trapped in this awful limbo. I started noticing things I'd never paid attention to before. Susan had always been open with her phone, leaving it on the counter, not caring if I saw her messages or calls. But now she clutched it close, the screen angled away from me. If I walked into a room while she was texting, she'd lock the screen and place it face down on whatever surface was nearby. One evening, while she was in the shower, I saw her phone light up with a message. The notification only showed the initials DT. My heart jumped into my throat. I didn't recognize the name, but I had a sinking feeling that D might stand for Derek. I wanted to pick up the phone just to see what the message said, but something held me back. Maybe it was fear of what I might find, fear of what it would mean for us. Instead, I just stood there staring at it until she emerged from the bathroom, her hair wrapped in a towel. She saw me near her phone and froze for a split second before laughing nervously. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice light but her eyes sharp. "Nothing," I said quickly, stepping away. "Just looking for the remote." She didn't say anything, but she grabbed her phone and slipped it into her pocket. The moment passed, but the tension in the air was impossible to ignore. Over the next few days, I tried to act normal, but inside I was falling apart. I couldn't concentrate at work, couldn't enjoy the things I used to. Every time Susan left the house, I found myself wondering where she was really going and who she was with. I hated feeling like this, like some paranoid, jealous husband, but I couldn't help it. One night, after she went to bed, I couldn't take it anymore. I sat in the living room staring at the blank TV screen, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to let it go, to trust her like I always had. But another part of me, the part that had seen those photos, smelled that unfamiliar perfume, and noticed how she guarded her phone. Knew I couldn't. I remembered my friend Tommy, who had gone through a messy divorce a few years back. He'd hired a private investigator to find out if his wife was cheating, and while the results had been painful, at least he'd gotten the truth. The next morning, I called Tommy. I hadn't spoken to him in a while, so the conversation started awkwardly, but when I finally told him what was going on, he didn't judge me. "Harold, I'm sorry you're dealing with this," he said. "But listen, if you really think something's up, you need to find out for sure. You don't deserve to live in the dark like this." He gave me the number of the investigator he'd used, a man named Ray. I hesitated for a long time before calling, but eventually I did. Ray was calm and professional, asking me for details about Susan's routine, her friends, and anything unusual I'd noticed. I felt sick giving him all this information, like I was betraying her somehow, but at the same time, I knew I couldn't keep living like this. Ray assured me he'd be discreet and said he'd get back to me in a week. That week felt like the longest of my life. Every time Susan left the house, my mind raced with possibilities. Was she really going to work, meeting friends, or was she with him, Derek? Finally, Ray called me with an update. He'd followed Susan on one of her errands and had seen her meet up with a man at a coffee shop. He sent me a photo. It was Derek. My stomach dropped when I saw them together. They weren't doing anything inappropriate, just sitting across from each other talking, but the way Susan was leaning forward, her hand resting lightly on his arm, spoke volumes. Ray promised to keep investigating, but I didn't know how much more I could take. Seeing that photo had broken something inside me. I wasn't sure if I wanted more proof, or if I wanted to pretend it didn't exist. Susan came home that evening, cheerful as ever. She kissed me on the cheek and asked how my day was. I played along, forcing a smile, but inside I felt like a stranger in my own life. The cracks in our marriage were no longer invisible. They were deep, and they were spreading, and I had no idea how to stop them. The days following Ray's call felt like I was living in a haze. Every interaction with Susan felt like a performance. Her playing the role of a loving wife, and me pretending that everything was fine. But the truth was eating away at me. The image of her leaning into Derek, her hand on his arm, was burned into my brain. It wasn't outright betrayal, but it was enough to confirm my worst fears. Ray said he'd keep watching, and I agreed. I needed more than just a photo of a coffee meeting. I needed the whole truth, as painful as I knew it would be. But waiting for answers was like being stuck in limbo. I felt restless, distracted, and increasingly irritable. Susan must have noticed the shift in me because she started asking questions. "Are you okay?" she'd ask, tilting her head with concern. "You've seemed distant lately." "I'm fine," I'd say, forcing a smile. "Just busy with work." She didn't push, but I could see the flicker of doubt in her eyes. I wondered if she suspected I was onto her. A few days later, Ray called again, his tone more serious this time. "I've got something you need to see," he said. We arranged to meet at his office. My hands were shaking as I drove there, my mind racing with possibilities. When I arrived, Ray handed me a folder. Inside were more photos. In the first few, Susan and Derek were sitting in the same coffee shop. Then there were pictures of them leaving together, walking side by side, their body language intimate. The final photo hit me like a punch to the gut. It was them standing by his car, her hand on his chest, his lips brushing her forehead. I stared at the images, my stomach twisting into knots. It was one thing to suspect, but seeing it laid out so clearly was devastating. "There's more," Ray said, hesitating. He slid a USB drive across the table. "This is from last night. I followed them to a hotel." I didn't know what to say. My hands felt clammy as I picked up the drive. "You don't have to look at it right away," Ray said. "But when you're ready, you'll know." I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. When I got home, Susan was in the kitchen, humming softly as she cooked dinner. The sight of her, so calm and carefree, made me feel sick. I couldn't sit down and pretend everything was fine, so I told her I wasn't hungry and went straight to the bedroom. I locked the door, plugged the USB drive into my laptop, and pressed play. The footage was grainy but clear enough. It showed Susan and Derek walking into the hotel lobby, laughing and talking like they didn't have a care in the world. They approached the reception desk where Derek handed over a credit card. Susan stood close to him, her hand resting lightly on his back. They were given a room key, and the footage ended with them stepping into the elevator together. I slammed the laptop shut, my chest heaving. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. There it was. Proof that my wife, the woman I'd built a life with, was having an affair. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the dark screen of my laptop, replaying every moment of our relationship in my mind. I thought about the nights we'd spent laughing together, the promises we'd made, the future we'd planned. Now it all felt like a cruel joke. The next morning, Susan acted like nothing was wrong. She kissed me on the cheek before heading off to work, completely oblivious to the storm raging inside me. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but I wasn't ready. I needed to figure out what to say, how to say it, and what I wanted to happen next. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to throw the photos in her face and make her feel the same pain she'd caused me. But another part of me, the part that still loved her despite everything, just wanted to understand why. That evening, I called Ray again. I told him I needed more, not just photos and footage. I needed the full story. Who was Derek? How long had this been going on? And most importantly, why? Ray promised to dig deeper, and I hung up feeling a mix of relief and dread. I didn't know what else he'd find, but I knew one thing for sure. The cracks in our marriage had become too big to ignore. The truth was coming, whether I was ready for it or not. The next few days passed in a fog. My conversations with Susan were hollow and forced, like I was playing a part in some surreal play. She went about her life as if nothing had changed, smiling, laughing, humming her favorite songs while cooking. But every time I looked at her, I couldn't stop picturing her walking into that hotel with Derek. The memories of our life together, once so comforting, now felt like a cruel reminder of what I'd lost. Ray called me again 3 days later. His voice was calm as always, but I could sense the gravity of what he had to tell me. "I've done some deeper digging," he said. "I think you're going to want to sit down for this." I met him at his office that evening, bracing myself for what was coming. He handed me another folder, thicker this time. Inside were copies of emails and text messages between Susan and Derek. They were flirtatious at first, then explicit, filled with plans to meet, coded phrases, and even references to me. "She talks about you keeping her on a leash," Ray said quietly as I flipped through the pages. "But it's clear he doesn't feel the same way about her. He's seeing other women too." Hearing that made my stomach churn. She wasn't just betraying me. She was throwing everything we had away for a man who didn't even respect her enough to stay faithful. Ray also found out that the affair had been going on for months, starting long before the party. Derek was the one who'd invited her, knowing full well how it would look to me. "There's one more thing," Ray said, pulling out a small stack of papers. "I didn't want to assume, but I thought you should know." The papers were financial records, joint accounts, credit card statements, and withdrawals Susan had been making. I scanned them quickly, my blood boiling. She had been taking money from our savings, and spending it on fancy dinners, gifts, and even that hotel. "She's using your money to fund the affair," Ray said softly. I couldn't speak. My hands trembled as I clutched the papers. My mind raced, replaying every moment of our marriage, the vacations we'd saved for, the sacrifices we'd made, the trust I'd put in her. All of it was being used to build a fantasy life with another man. When I got home that night, Susan was already in bed. I sat in the living room, staring at the folder Ray had given me. Part of me wanted to wake her up right then and there, to throw the evidence in her face and demand an explanation. But another part of me, the part that was still numb with shock, couldn't do it. Not yet. Instead, I stayed up all night, thinking about how to confront her. What would I say? Would she deny it? Would she try to lie her way out of it? Or would she admit everything and beg for forgiveness? I didn't know which possibility scared me more. The next morning, Susan seemed cheerful as ever. She kissed me on the cheek, told me she had another work meeting after hours, and left without a second thought. As soon as she was gone, I went to our bedroom and started searching. I felt sick invading her privacy like this, but I needed answers. I looked through drawers, checked her closet, and even flipped through her day planner. That's when I found it, tucked into the back of her purse, a small envelope with Derek's name scrawled on the front. Inside was a note written in her handwriting. It was short, but devastating. Derek, last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. Harold suspects something, but I'll handle it. I'll see you again soon. S. I sank onto the bed, clutching the note in my hands. Any lingering doubts I had were gone. It wasn't just in my head. She was lying to me, sneaking around, and planning to continue doing it. That evening, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. When she came home, I was sitting at the kitchen table, the folder from Ray in front of me. She walked in, her smile faltering when she saw my expression. "What's wrong?" she asked, setting her purse down. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I opened the folder and slid the photos across the table. Her face went pale as she looked at them. "Care to explain?" I asked, my voice steady but cold. She stared at the photos, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I don't know what this is," she stammered. "This isn't what it looks like." "Oh, it's exactly what it looks like," I snapped, my composure cracking. "I know about Derek. I know about the hotel. I know about the money. So don't you dare sit there and lie to me." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I thought she might actually feel guilty. But then her expression hardened. "Okay, fine," she said, crossing her arms. "Yes, I've been seeing Derek, but it's not what you think. It's not serious. You've been so distant lately, Harold. I didn't feel appreciated. I needed someone who made me feel alive again." Her words hit me like a slap in the face. I stared at her, barely able to process what she was saying. "So, this is my fault?" I asked, my voice rising. "You betrayed me because you didn't feel appreciated?" She shrugged, her tears forgotten. "Maybe if you'd paid more attention to me, I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere." I stood up, my hands shaking with anger. "Don't you dare put this on me, Susan. You made this choice. You destroyed our marriage. And for what? For some guy who doesn't even care about you?" She flinched at that but didn't respond. Instead, she grabbed her purse and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. I stood there for a long time, my mind racing. This wasn't the woman I married. The Susan I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. But one thing was clear. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. After Susan stormed out, I sat in silence, staring at the empty space where she had been. My hands were still shaking, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I had just confronted my wife about her affair, and instead of remorse, she blamed me. I replayed the conversation over and over in my head, each word cutting deeper than the last. I needed someone who made me feel alive again. What about me? What about our marriage? Had I ever mattered to her at all? I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake in bed, waiting for her to come home. But she didn't. By morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Susan. "I need space. Staying with a friend tonight. We'll talk later." No apology, no regret, just space. I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to smash my phone against the wall. But instead of responding, I got up, grabbed a trash bag, and started packing. I didn't know where she was, and I didn't care. I wasn't waiting around for her to decide if she wanted to keep lying to me or not. I went through the bedroom, stuffing her things into the bag, her clothes, her makeup, the perfume that wasn't meant for me. By the time I was done, my hands were sore from gripping the fabric too hard. I set the bag by the door, knowing she'd see it the moment she walked in. Then I left. I needed air. I needed to clear my head before I did something I'd regret. I ended up at a bar, staring at a glass of whiskey I barely tasted. Everything around me felt distant, voices blending into a low hum. I used to believe in love, in loyalty. I believed in us. But now? Now I wasn't sure I believed in anything. I didn't go home that night. I stayed at a cheap motel, my mind spiraling. When morning came, I checked my phone again. No new messages, She hadn't even asked where I was. That was the moment I realized this marriage was already over. It was just a matter of who would walk away first, and I wasn't going to let it be her. I drove home the next morning, my stomach twisting into knots. The bag of Susan's things was still by the door, untouched. That meant she hadn't come home. I should have felt relieved, maybe even free. Instead, all I felt was exhaustion. 7 years of marriage reduced to this: lies, betrayal, and now silence. I sat on the couch, staring at the floor, waiting for her to show up. I wasn't going to text. I wasn't going to call. If she still had any respect left for me, she'd come back and face what she had done. Hours passed. The sun started to set. And then, finally, the front door creaked open. Susan stepped inside, her face blank. She saw the bag and let out a dry laugh. "Really? You're throwing me out?" I folded my arms, keeping my voice calm. "I packed your things. Where you go from here is up to you." She rolled her eyes and tossed her keys onto the counter. "So that's it? You're not even going to fight for this?" "Fight for what?" I asked, my voice steady. "For a woman who lied to me? For someone who used our money to sneak around with another man?" I shook my head. "No, Susan, I'm done." She crossed her arms, her expression shifting. "So that's it, huh? You're just going to walk away? What happened to for better or worse?" I let out a bitter laugh. "You killed that vow the moment you stepped into that hotel." She opened her mouth to argue but stopped. For the first time, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Not regret, just realization. She knew she had pushed too far, and there was no coming back from this. Susan let out a slow breath, looking at the bag by the door. "I guess I underestimated you," she muttered. I didn't respond. I just waited. She grabbed the bag, slung it over her shoulder, and turned toward the door. But before she left, she looked back at me one last time. "No one else will ever love you the way I did," she said softly. I met her gaze, my voice calm but firm. "Good." And with that, she walked out. The moment the door shut behind her, I exhaled, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. It was over. Finally. After Susan left, the silence in the house felt different. Not empty, not painful, just peaceful. For the first time in weeks, my chest didn't feel tight. I wasn't waiting for the next lie, the next excuse, the next betrayal. It was over. I had finally let go of something that was already gone. The next few days, I focused on myself. I cleaned the house, got rid of every reminder of her, and even started going to the gym again, something I had neglected for years. It felt good to take control of my life again. Then one evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Tommy. "Haven't seen you in a while? Drinks this Friday?" I hesitated for a moment. The old me, the one who stayed home waiting for Susan, making excuses for her, might have said no. But that man was gone. "Let's do it," I replied. That Friday night, I walked into the bar feeling lighter than I had in years. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't broken. I was free. And as I laughed with old friends, surrounded by people who actually valued me, I realized something. Losing Susan wasn't the end of my life. It was the beginning of a better one.